Greetings, Tezos Nation. I'm Stu from the Tezos Commons. Joining me today is Marco Violet Vianello, a computer scientist specializing in artificial intelligence, currently applying his unique set of skills to plant care brand So Vital with a stunning NFT-powered generative art project they've dubbed Medivert. In addition to learning as much as we can about Metavert and generative art's place in the Tezos ecosystem, we'll also be giving away a Tezos branded Nano Ledger to one lucky viewer today. If you'd like that lucky viewer to be you, keep an ear out for a keyword later on during the stream. And of course, if you have any questions for Marco that you'd like me to ask, please add them in the chat at any time and we'll get to as many as we can before we wrap up. Hi, Marco. How are things in London?
Hi, Stu. Things are great. Thank you. How are things on your end?
They are lovely. It's a beautiful day. To get us started, can you tell us a bit about your background and how you got your start in the exciting world of blockchain technology?
Sure. So my name is Marco. I'm half French, half Italian, and I always had kind of a technical background. I've always been fascinated by mathematics, video games, puzzles. So I guess my interest kind of started there. When I was figuring out what I wanted to do for university, computer science was quite an easy choice because for me, I see it like a game, a puzzle as well. So I was able to get lost in that world quite easily. And towards the end of my university degree, I did a lot of modules in AI, so machine learning, reinforcement learning, like all the aspects of it fascinated me. And it came towards the end of the year when I had to choose a thesis topic. And I could have chosen something suggested by university or come up with a topic on my own. And that's when I had a long think about what meant a lot to me, what I was passionate about. And I felt as if I stand it out a bit from other students, perhaps because my interest was technical, but I'm also very open to the world around me. I'm very interested in art, and I'm very sensitive to things like music and how things make me feel. And so I decided to kind of go on a quest to try and marry AI and art. And I built a project called Creating Food with AI. So it was creating dishes that did not exist with artificial intelligence. And that was a very fun project. I did that in collaboration with this art studio called Obvious Art, who are these three French guys. And since I'm part French myself, I think that's why they were quite keen to collaborate with me. But they're very successful. They sold the first AI generated painting at Christie's for, I think, $500,000 in 2017. So I was super happily surprised to see that they wanted to work with me, and they gave me this project, and it was a great collaboration. And off the back of that, I've been keeping my work on it because I do feel like we have similar kind of approaches, but I do feel I have my own vision, my own touch to these artworks, and yeah, it's been a fun journey. It's definitely a very interesting tool to work with.
What was the most interesting dish that the AI came up with?
That's an interesting question. For me, it's very fun when I generate something that looks real. Like I like showing people, the pictures and not giving any context at all of how it's made, and they're like, "Oh yeah, like that's a chicken Kiev, or I don't know, that's a beautiful dessert I want to eat." Like for me, I guess as a software engineer, it means I've fulfilled my mission. Like I've managed to fool someone into believing it's real. But then the other question is, does it have to look real in order to be cool or like considered art? And that's something that's a kind of two parts of my brain kind of fighting. One that wants it to be very realistic, and the other who wants it to be a bit more artistic and make you feel a certain way.
Totally. So, in in terms of your collaboration with So Vital, blockchain collaborations with plant care brands are not something we've seen a whole lot of here in the Tezos space so far. What can you tell us about your partnership with So Vital and how that project took shape?
Sure, sure. So I met Jack through my brother, and as soon as I met him, I was kind of taken away by his passion for nature and plants, and how he managed to build this community of plant lovers who are really passionate about them. And I was very impressed by the design and just the look of it. Like there was something about it that just felt right and just made sense. And I'm very appreciative of good design and good storytelling, and it definitely ticked all those boxes. And it was right after I had finished my project for food. So it was the summer. I was enjoying my summer after uni. I was kind of thinking about what my next move was, and we connected on a lot of points, namely the one of science and art. Like I was telling him, yeah, like I really enjoyed this project, and I think the thing that really made it work for me, that really made it like passionate work, was the fact that I was, programming, which is something I enjoy. I enjoy problem solving, but the output I was getting wasn't numbers, it wasn't metrics, it wasn't tests going green or red. It was, it was art. I had to reflect on how it made me feel, which is a very
Mm.
interesting workflow, like programming, doing technical work, and then the feedback comes from your emotions. So I told him, yeah, like I really think that the things I like the most in life are things that are between science and art. And he was like, I very much connect on that point, and that's exactly what the brand So Vital embraces and is about. And I had always had the intention of applying this kind of work for nature. So I'm very much fascinated with patterns in nature and fractals and chaos theory and all those things. Like it's something I find deeply amazing. And I did it my first project for food, but I think it's much more appropriate for the one I've done with So Vital about flowers, because flowers have that mathematical programming behind it, and the AI is able to break that down and rebuild it in a beautiful way. And so it came quite naturally, this collaboration, where I had this desire to do it for nature, and uh, I enjoyed Jack's passion, and he was also in that field of nature and science, and it came quite organically.
Makes a lot of sense. Presumably, at some point in the initial stages of those discussions, a decision was made to build your vision out here in the Tezos ecosystem. What were the reasons you and So Vital decided Tezos was the right blockchain for Medivert?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I think it was quite obvious why we were going to choose Tezos, and it was, which makes sense with the brand, is the eco-friendly aspect of it. I had a bit of interest in blockchain technology through my degree, and I've looked, I think, a few of the metrics of like the energy cost compared to like the Ethereum blockchain. Um, and I think it's also a very popular choice for that reason for other people. So it just made sense with our brand to do it with Tezos.
Okay. So, as the artist behind this project, how would you explain Medivert to somebody who's hearing about it for the very first time?
Sure. So Metavert is a series of artworks created by artificial intelligence of flowers. And there's different kinds of artworks to kind of really explore this AI generation process. Um, I would say some of them are, so we're getting quite technical in the details of how the AI works, but the essentially, when I teach an AI something, how to generate anything, whether it be flowers or food, I give it a lot of images in order to build its understanding. And what it does is that it takes all of these images and tries to group them according to specific features that it just tries to see. And I always like to use this detail, which is the AI has essentially a way of organizing this data in a 512 dimension matrix, at least the specific model I use. Um, and so, yeah, it just tries to group all this data. And the fun thing as an artist afterwards is to kind of explore the AI's brain and try to understand what it's learned. So we've done three categories of artworks. One of them is called interpolation. So it's, as I said, navigating in the AI's brain and seeing the connections between the groups of flowers it managed to come up with. And that has a very interesting feel. I think they're the most visually pleasing videos, because I feel we all have an understanding of what a flower is. We've all seen flowers in nature. I think if I tell you the word flower, you have lots of images that come in your head.
Mhm.
What this video, I think, is able to capture is that transition that's quite quick, but visually very smooth, going from flower to flower. And it's quite crazy because you see it and you're like, yes, like that was able to condense in like a 10-second video what a flower is. And that's quite amazing. And I also feel it's like a visual effect that I don't think is achievable in any other way, whether it be like video creation or processing. Like I think the AI aspect of it creates an effect that I don't think is very easily reproducible otherwise. And then the two other artworks, we have some beautiful stills of kind of these flowers frozen, So you can kind of admire their beauty. And if you look at some of them, you can see in the center of the flower these mathematical patterns, these fractals, these symmetries that reproduce. And it's very strange because when you look at it like at a glance, you're like, that's a flower. But if you look at it for long enough, you are kind of weirded out, and you see that there's something off, or it's a bit too perfect in some cases. And yeah, I love like the interaction with the viewer for those. And the third and final series of artworks I've done is called survival videos. So these essentially I've built by taking a picture of the flower from the first point in time where the AI has tried to generate it, and then one image across its entire journey to becoming a realistic flower. And those I just think are beautiful. And it's a very interesting concept because when you see the first images, it's like an explosion of color. It doesn't look
Hmm.
much like a flower. It just like explodes, it turns, it's trying to figure itself out. And then
Hmm.
as time goes by, it tries to become more and more realistic. And it's an interesting concept, I feel, because in real life, flowers, their condition for survival is to attract bees, is to spread, is to survive in that sense. And in this AI, in my computer, I've created this world where its condition for survival is to look realistic, which I think is super cool.
Hmm.
Um,
So it's
it,
almost like a glimpse into how the AI mind is working through its process.
Exactly, yeah.
Very
So that's
cool.
exactly I've had to build it. So the AI learns through time, and what I've done is that I've saved a version of the AI every time it's learned, like every 10 minutes. And then at the end for one specific image. So when you generate an image with an AI, you give a seed, which is a random variable which outputs to something.
Yeah.
I like the pun with the word seed, and it's about flowers as well. But you give it this. So what I would do is that I would save a lot of versions of this AI, and I would give it the same seed through all of these versions, which corresponds essentially to the same flower. And then I would build frame by frame this video that you see. So I find those very beautiful as well because the flower changes, evolves, and it's more of a journey. It has more like an individual feel to it, which I quite like.
That sounds really interesting. So when it's in that learning process, how does the AI get confirmation like that this is this is a good image, this is not one?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Um, so yeah, that's a very good question. It could be rephrased as like, how do you define photorealism, or how do you define something as realistic? Um, that's something I've had to really dig deep in during my thesis because I was really looking at the technical aspect of how these algorithms work, and there's no real metric to do it. There are some metrics that exist, and the way they do it is through mathematical curves and all that stuff. But I think in order to answer that question, the best way is to kind of describe how the AI works. I've used a kind of generative model called GAN, more specifically style GAN, which is a very photorealistic version of GAN. And so GAN stands for Generative Adversarial Network.
Mm,
I think it came out quite recently, in 2014. And it's a beautiful concept. So the way it works, I like to describe, it's the same as the human brain. So you have one pod that just generates with an exhibitionist urge to just create without really worrying whether it's good or bad. And then you have another pod called the discriminator, which casts doubt and gives feedback on, what it believes does not look good. And the way the discriminator does that is that it kind of compares the image to the data set you've given it.
mm,
And as a as a software engineer, as an AI engineer doing this project, I need to kind of keep the balance between the two in order to venture into some good artworks, and make sure that one doesn't overpower the other because that means results diverge. But at the end of the day, I don't feel realism is something that should be the goal for these artworks. It was definitely, I think, my mistake when I originally started on these artworks is to achieve photorealism is my goal because I'm an engineer. I want it to look real,
yeah.
and that's my mission. But once I have gotten to that point, I had a thought, and I realized that the artworks that made me feel, the most unique way were the artworks that looked photorealistic, but also had something a bit off about them, where you could see
Yeah.
the photorealism, but you had some of that mathematical structure that the AI had come up with, like very visible, either it be like on the center or like the way the
Yeah.
leaves are just too perfectly symmetrical. I liked that kind of effect, and you can
Well,
play with.
otherwise you would just end up with pictures of flowers, right?
Yeah, and it's quite underwhelming because you're like, yeah, it's a flower. Like, what's the story here? And so it's important to try and think like, what's the most effective art I can create that is appropriate with the medium that I'm using in order to create that art. That's why I like sometimes to just show my art without explaining or giving any context on the AI part, because I feel
Yeah.
if it's good art, it should just speak for itself, and the AI shouldn't be the 90% of the artwork. Like it should be, the video should be everything, and
Mm.
then you're like, oh, like I wanted to prompt the question, how is this made?
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, very fun.
So it seems like, I know for myself, I've been hearing the term generative art much more frequently recently. And I imagine it's the same for a lot of people. Do you think it's because the technology behind generative art is becoming more powerful, because the work being produced is more appealing, or is it because of something else entirely?
I think it's the two things you've said. I think it's because it's becoming more powerful. This sort of model that I use, I consider very recent, like 2014 is when this concept really came out, and it works beautifully. Um, and there have been models that have been coming out like 2017, 2019, and this model I use, Stalgan, which is fantastic because when I was starting my artworks, I was kind of evaluating different models, and my main criteria for the selection was resolution. I wanted something that was very high resolution because I wanted to look very real. And these models have come out not long ago, and they go up to 1024 by 1024 pixels, which is
Hmm.
high definition. And it's like an extremely hard job for the computer to compute. There's like billions of numbers that it needs to update all the time, and it is very computationally expensive. Like it takes like a powerful machine to run for a long time in order to generate these. So I do think it's the theory, the tech is quite recent, and the things that it's able to generate. I think there's a lot of new things coming out. There's so many new things. Like I think DALL-E that came out, I don't know, a couple of months ago, almost a year ago. Like I find that crazy. Like just the power of that model, like how it's able to encapsulate that much data. I find that crazy, and yeah, I definitely think it's something that is going to blow up, and it is blowing up. And with these NFTs as well, I think it's kind of creating that platform as well for digital art to be shared. So I'm very curious to see where it will go. But yeah, I think it's something that will definitely expand. I think it's like any form of art in the past. Like I like to think a lot about the Renaissance as well. Like there was like architecture, sculpture, and I think
Hmm.
once you've found this new medium, trying to push it to the max and develop tools to make it even more extra, I think it's something that we love doing. And yeah, I'm excited. I hope I can be part of the journey.
Well, it seems like you are part of that journey. All very interesting stuff so far. I'm excited to learn more. But before we get into the nitty gritty, we have a giveaway to do. So, are you ready for the world famous TezTalks lightning round?
I am ready. The infamous.
Okay. Just before we do that, I'd like to announce today's keyword for the Tezos branded Nano Ledger we're giving away today. Today's keyword is exclamation point Medivert, all lowercase. Enter the keyword exclamation point Medivert in the live stream chat, and Nightbot will randomly select today's winner, who will announce before the end of the stream. Okay, Marco, it's lightning round time. Remember, there are no wrong answers, and this is just for fun so our listeners can get to know you a little bit better. Are you ready?
I am ready.
What is the most accurate depiction of AI in a movie?
That's a good one. That's a very good one. I would say I really like the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey by Kubrick, and it's got this great AI. I think it's called HAL
Al.
9000.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and yeah, uh, I could elaborate, but it's the lightning round.
It's the lightning round. Sushi or pizza?
Pizza every day.
Movies or video games?
Movies.
Is this real life or are we in a simulation?
I'm fairly certain it's real life.
True or false? Money buys happiness.
Um, I would say true.
Name one thing you absolutely want to do before you die.
I would love to make a very good song.
The last place you traveled was?
Italy.
Me too, actually. In
Nice.
five words or less, how would your best friend describe you?
Curious, ambitious. Um, um,
You
it's
can
tough.
stick with two if you want.
I'll stick with those two, to be honest.
Okay, curious and ambitious. And finally, what is your favorite thing to do on a rainy day?
um, like binge a very good TV show.
Nice, nice. Thank you. Those were all excellent answers. This concludes the TezTalks lightning round. Let's get back into it. As I understand it, in addition to the beautiful artwork you're producing, there's an important fundraising angle to the Medivert story. Can you tell us a bit about what Medivert is raising funds for and how those funds will be used?
That's absolutely right. So all the money generated from the sales will be given away to planting trees in Kurdistan. So this is a project that So Vital has been doing for a year or two now, and yeah, all the proceeds will go towards that.
Very cool. We touched on this before. I find the concept of using science to create art to be a pretty fascinating topic. Can you talk a bit about, from your perspective, where you think the line is between science and art, if there is one at all?
I don't think there is one at all, to be honest. I think, yeah, it's hard to really define what art is, but there is definitely something I feel about the craft. I think art has a lot to do with mastering a craft, and I think we find aesthetically pleasing things that are very well crafted and very well built. And so I definitely feel there's that element of using a tool and perfecting and having a technique. I think this has a big part of it as well. But yeah, I really like that blurry line between the two because I've done. I'm very curious about other mediums of art as well, and something
Hmm.
I feel constantly challenges me on that point is music. There's something very scientific about music. Obviously, there's the sound waves, it's phonetics and all that stuff, and harmonies and things that go well together. And you can learn all the theory, which I've tried to do because it's an important thing to do. But at the end of the day, it's a lot about the feel. And for me, that's where art is, takes over. It's like,
Hmm.
if it makes you feel a certain way, if it makes you move, and that's something that I don't think can be programmed or can be, there's not like a perfect formula in order to achieve that. Um,
I've heard a few songs that were made by AI and they weren't great.
yeah, some are great, some are okay. Like if it's classical music, it really depends. I read a really good book on the topic of creativity and whether AI can learn to be creative. It's called the Creativity Code, and it's resonated within me with the things I'm passionate about. And yeah, it talked about AI generating music, and for some artists, it works really well. Like I think Beethoven had a very wrote a lot, so there's a lot to learn from, and also
Hmm.
there was a lot of structure. It was always like the same patterns over and over again. It was the same rhythms. So an AI was able to kind of easily generate, Beethoven sounding like songs.
Very cool. So is using this method to create artwork relating to plants and flowers something you've experimented with before, or is this strictly a function of your relationship with So Vital?
It's something that I had always wanted to do after my first project, and it just happened to be very convenient. That is exactly what they were passionate about and kind of were looking for. But it was something that I had really wanted to get into because I was very curious to see how an AI would like learn what a flower is, because the AI tries to like understand the patterns of the shape, the color, the combinations of different components. And if I as a human had like 10 images of flowers and tried to like draw them out, it would be very long, and I would probably, I don't know, I would kind of have a bias from a human because of what I know of the world, and like, I don't know, there's a certain bias I feel as a human when looking at these things and trying to do it manually, whereas the AI has a very, is very abrupt and is very brash in its way of doing it. It's very mathematical. So I was very curious to see how it would interpret that. But it's something I think I would love to do for anything in nature. Like, I have a long list of ideas, whether it be planets, stars, like patterns in sand, like butterflies, insects, like anything that is made by nature that has patterns, which to be honest, everything does. I would be very curious to see what the AI is able to make of that.
And what have you learned about AI and about flowers since you began working on Medivert?
That's a good question. I guess I've learned about flowers how mathematical they are. That I've seen. Just yeah, it's crazy how this tool of AI can like take something and just tear it apart and really like give you a new lens in a way. Like you can see a flower, and then you can, through tweaking the parameters, you can see like the mathematical things within it. So I've learned. I think it's changed my look on flowers absolutely, like a lot. Whenever I see flowers now, it's like a little, like it makes me feel there's that extra specialness, because I feel as if I know this flower, like I feel as if I've created it in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's quite fun. And then about AI, yeah, I guess I've learned. Um, I guess the thing I mentioned earlier with the process of creating art with AI is much trickier than I had anticipated, because um, there's no real metric of what is a good output, what is good content that is created by AI, and I think that's what was quite cool for me, because I was able to stop being a software engineer for a moment and become an artist. And it's a much harder craft. I'm not going to lie. It's a very hard thing, because you have to open up your sensitivity,
Much
and
more
you
subjective.
have to be subjective. And this AI as well, like I would press a button and it could generate 1,000 images. Um, and it's really hard as an artist to go through every single one and have that judgment of what is good, what is the value. Like, I find that really hard, like just in general, like seeing value in things and being able to recognize that. Um, so yeah, definitely learned a lot, I guess, more about the interaction with the AI than the AI itself.
Okay. So Medivert currently is still a work in progress. For people who are interested in learning more about this project or participating down the road when they have the opportunity by purchasing an NFT, where should they go to find out more about what you're working on?
Sure. I would recommend going on the So Vital website and subscribing to their newsletter, or following them on Instagram, or myself on Instagram. You can just type my full name. And yeah, stay tuned. I think yeah, it's planning to be released in October, in the next few months. So stay tuned.
Very cool. And finally, like, what has your experience been like building on Tezos and interacting with the people in the Tezos community?
So to be honest, I've delegated a lot of that work to So Vital and Jack.
That's fair.
So yeah, you'll have to ask to him.
So I'm the first Tezos person you've interacted with?
I think so. Yeah,
Fair enough. I hope I've made a good impression.
you made a great impression.
All right. We're just coming to the end here. Before we close off, I'd like to announce the winner of today's Tezos branded Nano Ledger giveaway. Today's winner is Diamond Hands, where the Z is the Tezos symbol, which is very cool. Congratulations, Diamond Hands. To claim your prize, just email us at social@tezoscommons.org. We'll request a screenshot for verification that you're the account owner. We'll get your shiny new ledger over to you as quick as we can. For those who missed out today, we remind you there are awesome giveaways to be found frequently here on the TezTalks live stream, so keep tuning in. If you'd like to get in touch with us, our social media contacts can be found at tezoscommons.org/TezTalks, and we'd love to hear from you. Marco, thanks so much for joining us today. It's always awesome to speak to the folks building out interesting projects like Medivert here in the Tezos ecosystem and keeping Tezos at the forefront of the blockchain revolution. Is there anything else you'd like to mention before we sign off here?
Thank you very much for having me, Stu. It's been wonderful. I love the conversation. And yeah, stay tuned for the Metavert artworks.
Right on. To everyone out there in Tezos land, thanks for joining us on the TezTalks live stream. I'm Stu from the Tezos Commons, and our awesome guest has been Marco Violet Vianello, generative NFT artist at Medivert and So Vital. Now let's go grow some plants.